Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I am with Joe Gottlieb, our President and CEO, for another 5 Minutes with Joe. And today we're going to be talking about a recent breach that's been in the news involving a credit card processing company and Visa, MasterCard, 79 banks over a long period of time. And, what exactly is that about, and how should we be looking at this news? So I guess the first thing is, what do we think about this guy who posted a bunch of the information that he gleaned from the breach online? So the gray hat involved in this.
Well, I don't know that we can call him a hero, but I think we can observe this behavior as part of the evolution of the maturity of the internet, the maturity of online commerce, the maturity of our ability to take very layered and in many places open technology and make sure we're making it work for us. And clearly the PCI effort that has cost a lot of money for banks and merchants and people that are involved with this has not protected us, has not really reduced these risks, or hasn't done it sufficiently such that therefore we would be seeing fewer of these breaches, right? So highlighting these items on the part, a gray hat coming forth and saying, here's what I got out of this particular breach, has triggered more awareness, more outing, so to speak. It's a little bit like journalism, and it's uncomfortable for those involved, but it may serve to prompt more action. Clearly more action is required. So the PCI effort, like I said, is a lot of compliance activity, but needs to be more and more effective because cybercriminals have certainly latched on to being able to monetize credit card numbers as an easy way to make money, and it's up to us to sort of protect ourselves against that. So this evolution, we saw it with WikiLeaks, right? Also a very uncomfortable situation where someone was outing lots of very, very sensitive information. Mm-hmm. But that's the sort of thing that prompts more self-awareness, a higher level of concern and of responsibility to erect the right level of protection. Now, how are we doing on the protection side? Tough gig, right? Mm-hmm. Complexity abounds, and the layers of the credit card processing, the clearinghouse, all those things, very, very complicated. I mean, you were reading something about the number of hops that someone might be involved with without even knowing when a transaction like this is going down.
Right.
We don't have perfect protection in all those layers, and we don't have good monitoring across all those layers and all those individual processing points. And so what we'll see, I believe, is just like MasterCard and Visa, or one of the two, put global payments on their sort of, took them off their good list, maybe put them on their bad list, invited them to recertify, but took them off a good list. As soon as this thing happened, that's an example of how the volume will continue to flow, but it's going to flow through those entities that have demonstrated an ability to do their part and to scale without presenting a high risk. Mm-hmm. And even if everyone has some risk, even if everyone has some breaches, we'll all still be in the game to minimize those. There's credit card fraud in the credit card industry. It's a natural part of that whole business. You manage it down. So the players in this ecosystem that are able to do a nice job scaling and keep their breach scenarios, their breach statistics down to keep their risk profile looking good, they're going to attract more business. Those that are not careful about this sort of thing, they're going to lose business, and they should. That's part of how this will be vetted out.
And so, some of the comments were, 79 banks did not, a single one of them, have alerting, monitoring, something that would say this IP address is not someone who should be in that system. I mean, how do we get to a place where, someone understands the implications of that?
Well, I mean, here, I don't know that you could even fault the banks, particularly in this case. This breach appears to have occurred in an area where a lot of this information was concentrated in a payment system. Mm-hmm. And so where you have concentrations of data that is sensitive like this, that serves maybe multiple banks or multiple users, the stakes are much higher, obviously, and so the risks are higher of a breach occurred. The impact is really, really high, and so I think that's just something that payment processors in particular will be in the sort of target sites of those examining how is this system evolving, how is it working, and do they get to earn the business to process these things. The transactions are going to keep happening, but being able to securely and in a low-risk way do your part of the processing, that's going to be a key part of your ability to win business and keep business.
And it certainly doesn't change the fact that they're all going to incur costs, right? I mean, we were talking a little bit about the costs involved in a breach, and normally we talk about that in the way of fines. But what was sort of one of the big takeaways from this with regards to the cost of what's happening behind the scenes with this breach?
Well, when these breaches happen, suddenly there's a huge customer service impact on the part of those that are having customers that either have been explicitly breached and it's known and disclosed, or are wondering if they've been breached because they heard about a particular breach that maybe involved their bank. So Chase was the only bank mentioned in this particular example, but I would imagine a lot of Chase customers, when they hear that, are wondering, was I breached? I didn't get a phone call. Did they phone everyone that was involved? Everyone's had a tendency to cover these things up, maybe not.
Right.
And so maybe I'm going to phone up my bank and ask, hey, what's up with this? What should I be doing?
Astounding.
Am I protected? What's going on? So we often talk about in an enterprise when divisions or individuals don't follow the policies of the security organization or they're not compliant, that can have an impact that security organizations are increasingly correlating and showing their organizations, wow, that's having an impact on the help desk. That's costing us money. So if we can be more compliant, don't just take my word for it. Don't just think of it as a smart thing to do. Let's reduce the company's costs by reducing our help desk footprint. Imagine a bank serving millions of customers that now has to deal with this this customer service impact way bigger than the average enterprise. So a big potential correlated cost that needs to be managed down effectively in a situation like this. And in this case, maybe it wasn't even the bank's fault.
Right.
Part of the ecosystem that they're plugged into is a necessary part of the way they do online commerce, but sort of comes with the territory.
And so, another comment was, well, I've got all the technology in the world, and so how would I have been able to, stay ahead of this, or what's going to happen when, this ricochets back on me? And I think we've been talking about the idea that if you keep your backyard, trimmed and you're able to show how, if any, you were involved in the process, you will probably pull yourself out of the more costly investigations and risks of fines, etc., than if you're involved and you can't prove that you weren't, right?
Right. Well, we always talk about having your arms around your own data. We also talk a bit about complexity of your own security posture and technology, and so there are lots of new whiz-bang technologies that are coming out that are doing more pinpointed security, more deep packet inspection. We're now examining, full packet capture of network flows. I mean, so all those things are possible. But our experience has been that consistent application of technologies that you and or your partners that are helping you understand is way more effective than just throwing more technology at the problem and losing control, losing your ability to manage and monitor and understand how it's actually being effective. Because before you know it, you can have so many overlapping protections in your own environment, you're not really sure what's working, and you might even be masking what's really going on in your infrastructure. So it's not an assertion against the need to have defense in depth or the need to stay current on the threat horizon with new technologies. On the contrary, it's just a reminder that managing them well, even if they're not the most advanced capabilities, that's going to be more effective than having the latest technology and not managing it well.
Right. And I think you've brought up a couple of times, automation and the ability to put countermeasures into place that make sense based on your policies and that sort of thing. How do you think folks should be thinking about that in context?
Well, automation is absolutely necessary. It's become very, very clear that even if we have large security teams, and most of us do not, in the even large enterprise and large government agency world, even if we have large teams, we need to make them more effective by automating all this data filtering that has to happen. The bad stuff is happening inside a sea of legitimate behaviors that are going on in your operation. And so you have to be able to automate that. And if you don't automate it, and you're left just poking through logs on a reactive basis or even a proactive basis, you just can't master the problem. It's impossible. So I think more and more as we confront that, as organizations in the security industry, we're going to be more effective at establishing a more manageable posture, in this world. It won't be perfect. We'll constantly be learning about incursions and new things and areas where we're strong versus where we're weak, but we will have some mastery and some continuous improvement over our operation if we conduct these measurements and we have an organizational sort of learning process that makes the most of the technologies that we put in place. And automation is a key part of that enable us to keep at a higher level, not doing the drudgery, the manual stuff that would overwhelm us, but staying on top of the things that merit our time, merit our interest, while automating everything else. Let the machines do the drudgery, and let's keep our folks focused on the stuff that requires good gray matter, good discernment about landscape, about environment, about knowledge of the industry and how it's operating, to protect resources and data.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that, your perspective on that. We will be back again with another 5 Minutes with Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.